Hi, my name is Dave Denhad, and I work as a consulting pastor with Pastor Church Resources, an agency of the Christian Reformed Church in North America. Pastor Church Resources exists to come alongside of all of the churches within our denomination, large or small, rural, urban, suburban, in Canada and in the United States. Our hope is to help churches thrive and flourish. And what I'd like to do with you today, for just a moment, is share with you what our consultation work looks like, our work with churches, so that you know what happens when you call Pastor Church Resources. Maybe it's best to think of our work in terms of three different components or phases. We provide advice for churches, we provide consultation, a longer conversation in other words, also for churches, and we provide coaching for churches. In that first component, the advice giving phase, usually that's prompted by a telephone call or an email from a pastor or a church visitor or from somebody on council. And we hear the story, we listen to the events, we listen to the concerns and the questions that are being presented, and we encourage a couple of things. We first of all encourage connection with one another on scene within the congregation, because we tend to find that people are avoiding hard topics and avoiding one another and not doing a very good job of listening to one another and speaking in ways that actually deepen conflict rather than resolve it. And so we encourage that connectedness with each other. That's the first thing. We also encourage connection with the classes and with key people on the classes level, namely the regional pastor who is there for the support of the pastor in the congregation, and the church visitors who are there for the support of the council of the congregation. Now, in addition to making sure that those connections are all in place, we'll teach some things like healthy functioning, healthy relationships, healthy process, and then finally we'll let the caller know, or the emailer, that Pastor Church Resources is always available for more conversation and for consultation if the council senses that that's necessary or important. Now, many of the connections that come our way don't actually go beyond the advice giving stage, but sometimes they do. So let's talk about the second phase or component of the work of Pastor Church Resources, the consultation phase. Sometimes, after all of the advice we've given in the advice giving stage, the council still feels stuck. And so they'll ask us to come in and consult with them, engaging in a longer conversation. And in that conversation, we get to bring in an outsider's eyes and ears. We get to play the objective third party. We also bring a pastor's heart to the conversation, a heart for the thriving and well-being of the people within the church. And of course, we also bring our experience with many other churches that are often or have been in similar situations as the one that's faced by the church that we're working with. So in that consultation phase, we start with a council meeting. That council meeting has two parts. In the first part, everybody's around the table. The elders, the deacons, the pastor, and sometimes the church visitors and the regional pastor. And we ask open-ended questions like, what's brought you to this point in your church's life? Or what's been challenging for you in this part of your church's life? Or maybe what is God asking you to pay attention to in this season of challenge in your church's life? So that's the first part of that conversation in that initial council meeting. In the second part of that conversation, we'll ask the pastor to be dismissed, and we'll engage just the elders and the deacons in that second part of the conversation. We'll ask another couple of open-ended questions like, what have you heard so far that leads you to think of things a little differently than you did before? Or another question might be, what else can you tell us that will help us to know better the landscape here at the church and to help us help you by telling us what's going on more in depth? So following that initial council meeting with those two parts, we'll engage in a few more one-on-one meetings as a follow-up, usually involving the church staff members or key ministry leaders or whomever else the council might suggest to us as important to talk with. And sometimes when we sense that the council and the congregation are not very well connected, we'll involve the entire congregation in an exercise called listening groups, where we divide all of the participants into small groups and ask every individual to reflect on 3 questions with us. What do you value about your congregation? Number 1. Number 2, what are your concerns about your congregation? And then number 3, what are your hopes for your congregation? Now, after all of those meetings, the meeting with the council, the meeting with staff people, perhaps the meeting with the congregation, we'll take some time to think and reflect and pray over all that we have heard and seen on scene with that church. And then we'll write up a consultation report. And in that report, we'll provide the council with a whole number of observations that we've been able to make, as well as some recommendations based on our observations. And then comes a second council meeting. And in that second council meeting, we'll present that consultation report with its observations and its recommendations. And then we'll leave it to the council to determine how to proceed from there. Because in our church polity, as a Christian Reformed denomination, the church council always drives the bus in matters like this. So we'll bring that consultation report and we'll leave to the council whether or not to pursue all of our recommendations, some of our recommendations, or even none of our recommendations. It's completely up to the council. So that's our consultation process. And once again, we'll make clear to the council that we remain available for further conversation, further consultation. If some of the recommendations that we make require some more assistance, we're always glad to provide that too. Now, in the third component or phase of our work with churches, we provide coaching. And this usually occurs after the consultation process is complete. And we'll spend 2 or 3 sessions with the council chairperson and with one other person on council. And that usually, again, is driven by an open-ended question. What would you like to talk about? You've heard the report, you have it in your hands, so you tell us. What would you like to pursue or to think about with us? Or to explore more in depth with somebody who brings an outsider's ears and eyes? And again, always glad to do that, not just in that moment, but farther on in the process, in the relationship with this church. We're always available for more conversation and more consultation. So that's our process. Advice, consultation, coaching. Three parts, 3 component parts. Pastor Church Resources is committed to helping churches and pastors to flourish. We're supported primarily by pledges from churches just like yours. It's a way in which our denomination's churches can provide for specific congregations that are in need. If you'd like more information about Pastor Church Resources and our ministries, please send us an email at pastorchurch@crcna.org.